Errol Spence big announcement. Back in action in April. Opponent Tba Thurman Crawford Pacquiao Boots Ennis. What's good, everybody? It's your boy Cardinal Red Sports. Let's talk about it. Alright, so your boy, big homie Errol the True Spence Jr. took to Twitter last night to announce he will be returning to the ring in April. As a boxing fan, I'm not sure how I feel about that yet. I just read the news. And the fact that he was in that car accident not too long ago, it was reported at first that he wasn't injured. But then later, about a couple of days, a week later, he came out and said that he had bumps and bruises that he needed to try to get over before he gets back in the boxing ring. And then it was announced he wouldn't be returning until spring. And I was like, man, that's a long time to be waiting as a boxing fan, being that he hasn't been in the ring since last April. So as a fan, I don't really know how I feel about that yet. I'm kind of disappointed. As a commentator, as an analyst of boxing, then I see why they're doing it. I understand why they're doing it. Safety reasons. He's got to make sure that he is 100% before he gets back into the ring, because a loss at this point could be detrimental to the rest of his career. Now, there was no opponent announced for his next fight. He didn't give any clue into who he's going to be fighting. The majority of people at this point believe it's going to be Keith Thurman. That is an extremely easy fight to make for PBC. It's already there. Keith Thurman is 100% down. He's been training. Errol Spence has announced several times that he has no intentions of fighting Thurman. But because of the situation that's going on, the Terence Crawford, Errol Spence situation, the fact that he's talking about spinning the block, there's a possibility of being stripped. And it just kind of, I think in a lot of people's minds, it just makes sense at this point for him to fight Thurman. But a couple of weeks ago, and at least for the past 8 months, you've had Boots Ennis out there petitioning and, advocating for his placement as a mandatory. And the fact that he's IBF number one and the IBF title is the one that hasn't been defended in the longest. So a lot of people, I wouldn't say the majority, but a lot of people believe that Boots should be next. So Boots is very high on the list, and Boots' name has been brought up several times as a possibility as Errol Spence's next fight. And if you go off of Bozzy Ennis's and Boots Ennis's timeline of the 120 days, 160 days, whatever it was, then it kind of runs you right into that April-May timeline that Errol Spence just announced. Now, if it is Thurman, man, he would have been training for he's going into a situation almost like Pacquiao. To go back to the Pacquiao incident, Pacquiao was training to make his comeback after he was stripped. First, he had announced that they had offered Terence Crawford $10 million for the fight, and they were waiting for the contracts to come back. Somehow, Team Crawford decided to turn that down. I'm not sure why. There were a few reasons given, but I'm not sure if I completely believe the reasons. But if you remember, Pacquiao had already been training for like 2 months over in the Philippines by the time that was announced. And then when that fell apart, it had been like 3 months, 4 months, somewhere around there that he had been training. And then they announced the Spence fight, that the Spence fight was going to happen. And he had been training for like 5 months. He had been training for an extremely long time before the Errol Spence fight had been canceled on him. Then he going into the Ugas fight. So for people who keep saying, well, he got destroyed by Ugas, this, that, and the third, the problem that you have to understand is that Manny Pacquiao had been training for 2 different fights already. He had started with the Crawford fight. The Crawford fight fell apart, and he went with the Spence fight. The Spence fight fell apart, and then you get thrown into a Ugas fight. So it wasn't like he walked into that fight with a game plan, because he didn't. And it's almost like the same thing that could be going on with Keith Thurman. Maybe they're trying to stall him out. and make him overtrained, so when he does get into the ring, he's overly prepared, and he ends up running into some maybe muscle problems or cramp problems, or anything could happen. That's the reason why having a set opponent sometimes is better than going into something unknown. It might work for a few younger fighters because when you're younger, you're a lot more hungrier, and you're really not even listening to the game plan anyway when you're younger. You're kind of just going off a feel. But when you're older and you're kind of setting your ways, then game planning is what matters at that point, because you're not the spring chicken that you once were, and your athletic ability is not always going to carry you. Sometimes it's going to be your ring IQ and your boxing knowledge that's going to get you through fights, and your experience, not just your athletic ability. And I think that's what Manny Pacquiao ran into. And it could be similar to what happens to Keith Thurman if he, in fact, is Errol Spence's next opponent. Then you have names out there like Terence Crawford. He could just go straight into a Crawford fight if they can, behind closed doors, get that made. And if that's something that Errol Spence really desires, and not just that he wants to get out of the division, I would actually hope that Errol Spence tried to negotiate with Crawford at this point. Forget about the rest of this stuff. Just go after the Crawford fight. Crawford, he got his tune-up. He said circle the block. You don't have to take a tune-up. You've had all the welterweight experience in the world. What's the point of having a tune-up at this point? Go straight for the Terence Crawford fight, get it over with, and beat him, and go ahead and move up. Because if you do it right now, or you do it in April, then there would be no need for a rematch. I think if you wait and Terence Crawford possibly gets another good fight in, because I think it's only one thing holding Crawford back at this point, and that's his level of competition. But if Terence Crawford goes out here and fights somebody credible, a real credible name like Boots Ennis before Earl does, and beats him, then it's going to change the whole game. You got Terence Crawford basically strung up by the feet right now, and you need to strike while the iron is hot, because he already had everything in his favor, but he can get an extra 25% at this point. Now, I think if he waits it and go ahead and fights Boots, and Boots gives, let's say Boots doesn't beat him, but Boots gives him a decent fight and makes him look like his skills are degrading a little bit, then you're going to have a change in the narrative and the change in the negotiating space. Even though Spence may still have those 3 belts, I think it would give Terence Crawford a little more ammunition in the negotiating room. So y'all let me know what y'all think about that down in the comment section below. Who do y'all think Errol Spence is going to announce as his next fight? Will it be one of those 4 names, Thurman, Pacquiao, Boots, or Terence Crawford? Will it be one of those 4 names, or is he going to pull a rabbit out of the hat? Maybe he goes with a David Evansian because he just wants a tune-up, and then goes straight into a Crawford fight. Anything's possible at this point, man. This is the sport of boxing, and nothing's set in stone anymore. Hit that like button for me. Share. Subscribe. Holler at me on all social media platforms. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter. More than likely to get a response on the tube, so holler at me over there. And we are live.
You feel me? Yeah, feel me? Flow sick when I flow quick, better go get your whole click. Spotless who you rolling with. I done told the chick you don't want have to hold your lip, so hold your lip. Now roll your hips, spotless team, coldest click, roll that shit, blow that shit. Keys that nigga with the gold that spit off the chain, tossing flames, caution dames, let her know. Can't put a chick on a pedestal. Don't think niggas is ready for who it be. Lewis Keys, take the chick and bruise her knees. Guarantee you lose to me. Niggas ain't confusing me. Just keep it real with me. I get the feel with me. I'm looking real spiffy. Kicks worth about a bill 60. Back in the day, I used to stay low. They used to pass the blunt. I used to say no. But now I'm smoking reefer. And now I'm drinking liquor. And now I'm in the telly. And now I'm taking pictures. We got them millimeters. We got them VHS's. So when we zoom in, you can see they my niggas. My niggas.